Hi everyone, welcome to the last segment of the video for this week. Now, in this particular segment, I would like to go through costs and also the break-even point. So let's get started. So costs, well technically, if you talk about costs, so what we are referring to here, it's actually a total cost. So I'm just going to write that down, total costs. Now in the total cost, there are two parts of the cost, which are fixed costs and variable costs. So what are those? So fixed cost is the sum of all payment made to firm's fixed factor of production. Now what does it mean by fixed factors of production? So fixed factors of production means that it's a factor that you have to pay, or factors that are associated even with producing zero outcome. So regardless of number of quantity, you still have to pay this. So means that the fixed cost is a cost that you still have to pay even though you have zero production. So let me give you an example. So say that if I am in McDonald's business and I want to set up a McDonald's store across the road. Now I still have to pay for the rent because that is the obligation that I actually rented the land. So regardless how many burgers or fries that I sold, they don't care. They just want to take my rent payment. So even if I go out of the business, as long as I'm still in the contract, I still have to pay the rent. So that's why that's the fixed cost. Now, for variable cost, it's the sum of all payment made to the firm variable factors. So in this case, you are actually the cost going to vary by the number of quantities. So if I sell more fries or if I sell more burgers, so obviously I definitely need to do more stuff and I need to hire more staff making those burgers out, frying or cooking the fries more often. Probably I still have to pay for inventory as well, because that my fries and my burgers are out a little bit faster because there's a lot of quantity goes out. I need to replace that, so I need to buy the inventory a little bit more as well. So those are what we call a variable cost, whereby the cost will change in respective to the number of quantities. So as you probably know, total cost, it's technically just a fixed cost plus variable cost. So that's to start. So total cost is fixed cost plus variable cost. And then what they do in here is that total cost is the variable cost per unit times quantity. So if you think about this, variable cost per unit times quantity, that made up total variable cost. And also fixed cost. So fixed cost is basically that's the total because it doesn't vary by quantity. Total cost per unit, it's going to be the total cost. So that includes fixed cost and variable cost. So I'm just going to put VC plus FC. So variable cost, fixed cost divided by quantity. So fairly straightforward. And you can see this. Okay, so what does this actually shows you is that as you produce more quantity, your total cost is being reduced, because not only more quantity covers you the variable cost, but it also covers some of the fixed costs. So that's why it's getting reduced. It's because of that. All right. So more quantity, okay, so helps you to cover variable costs and some of the fixed costs. So that's why it becomes like that. Now the break-even quantity or break-even point represents where revenue or unit required to total cover costs. Okay. So represents the revenue or units required to cover total costs. So in other words, we are looking at where total cost is equals to total revenue. So in this case, as you can see, this is my break-even point because this is where the costs are going to be equal to the revenue. Now, why is this important? Because this is actually a turning point. So the reason why companies, they really want to find out what is break-even point is because that's going to give them a rough estimate of how much they're going to recoup their investment could be. It gives them a buffer point of like, that's going to be my target, because anything after that, then they are actually making a positive return. And anything below that, that the company is going to be in trouble. So that's why it's very important point that a lot of people, even accountant or finance people, they really want to find out what is the break-even point. And so does in marketing as well, because we need to understand how are we doing, because at the moment, if we are not doing well, and we want to find out why. So coming back again to break-even point. So the profit at break-even point, it's going to be 0 because we're saying that that's where the total cost is going to be equals to total revenue. So obviously your profit is going to be 0. Break-even is only possible when a firm price are higher than its variable costs. So what they are saying is that as long as there is some contribution, then obviously you can actually make a break-even point. So we'll talk about that when we go through the example. Break-even analysis also helps in estimating when a firm will start their earning profits. So as I tell you, that's going to be the target because that's what you want to achieve. Each unit sold higher than the variable cost generate what we call a contribution, and that's going to be covering your fixed costs. So that's why it's important to find out whether you can cover your variable costs first. So in this case, they're just showing you a formula that, so this is probably something that you use quite a lot. So we talk about contribution somewhere in week 6 or week 7 when we talk about promotion. So if you remember, there is a contribution where it is the selling price minus the cost. So in this case, try to be more specific, is that the selling price minus the variable cost. And you also have the contribution margin, which is in percentage. So that's going to be contribution per unit divided by selling price of the unit. So think about it as the percentage of sales revenue, right? So just finding out the contribution perspective. So each unit sold higher than the variable cost will generate what we call a contribution. So as you can see in here, that's the fixed cost. But as long as you sell more products, then it helps you to cover some of your fixed costs. And eventually, then you start making your profit. So that's why sometimes people, they care more about their variable costs, because as long as they can cover their variable costs, then any unit sold, as long as they sell a bit more, they will eventually cover for their fixed costs, and ultimately they can start making profit. Okay, so what we want to do here is I'm going to do some sort of a decomposition of the formula. So just try to follow me to hopefully you'll understand this. So at a break-even point, so we know that the total revenue is going to be equals to total costs. Now total revenue, it's going to be equals to selling price times quantity. So that's going to be equals to total fixed cost plus variable cost in unit times quantity. So we have that. So if you rearrange this, it will be total fixed cost. That's going to be equals to the quantity sold bracket selling price minus unit variable cost. So that's why this part is what we call contribution. So as you can see, then we can find out from this formula to here, the break-even volume is going to be fixed costs in dollars divided by the contribution per unit in dollars. The break-even revenue, it's going to be the fixed cost in dollars divided by the contribution margin in percentage. So that's how you can derive those formula. All right, so without further ado, we're going to do a couple of exercises. So this is just to help you to gain more understanding about the break-even.